Share your words of wisdom.
Hey there, it's been a while. With Shadowlands launching in a mere couple of days, some of you are excited for the launch of new content and systems being introduced with the brand new expansion. Some are anxious, however, because of said systems, with people unsure whether to follow their heart when it comes to player choices or to follow the meta in order to accomplish the content you enjoy the most. Over the past 3 months or so, that's what I and many others who have been on the beta have been trying to do. The feeling on beta for the past months have been somewhat similar to being King Sisyphus. One moment you have an idea how things are ranking, and then the boulder just rolls back down the hill and we have to start again from scratch. This has happened so often that with unless constant simming, no one will be entirely sure what is best. Currently will remain the best. My plan over the beta was to cover all classes and specs, but with all the numbers going up or down, changing entirely, it's hard to get a read on what exactly they'll look like from a month from now, when everything should hopefully be more stabilized. The only class I've managed to hang onto information-wise is the Paladin, considering it's a one-man team is the best I can do. Without any further ado, this is the information that I have gathered regarding the Paladins. Starting off with the Covenant. Night Fae, you'll be getting Blessing of Seasons. It's less about personal benefit and more about increasing group utility. While you can absolutely use all the buffs on yourself, it would be wiser and better spent on other members of your group. Blessing of Summer goes very well with classes with heavy burst windows, especially when it's on top of their cooldowns, such as an Arcane Mage during their burn phase. Blessing of Autumn works very well for classes that can double dip from the 30% cooldown recovery, or classes that suffer from heavy cooldown usage. Example of ideal targets would be Paladins and mostly healers, especially the Holy Priest and the Holy Paladins running the Glimmer build. Blessing of Winter is one of the weaker blessings in the rotation. You can place it on the tank to ensure the debuff is always active, or you can look to add a little bit more damage by placing on classes that attack very frequently, such as Fury Warriors and Havoc Demon Hunters. Blessing of Spring should be at most time be placed on healers first, with second best placement on tanks with high self-heal, such as Blood Death Knights, Druids, or Protection Paladins. When it comes to placing the blessings, most notably Summer and Spring, it's best to communicate with your group to see which is the most effective time to apply these two blessings. In order to achieve the most value from it, such as Blessing of Spring, as when the Holy Priest is about to cast Divine Hymn, or applying Blessing of Summer as Destruction Warlock is about to spam Chaos Bolts. When it comes to other Night Fae Paladins, it's also very important that you aren't buffing the same target, as the current blessing will get overridden with the new blessing. So it's best to communicate with other similar paladins in order not to hinder each other, so you know what you are buffing and what they are buffing. Overall, Blessing of Seasons is one of the more difficult to use, and the added attention needed for it might not be enough for the value that you're going to get. For spec-specific strengths, this is a spec neutral. It has no inherent advantage or disadvantage if you multi-spec your paladin. What's good about Night Fae, however, is the soul shape is very advantageous for a low mobility class. It is the best mobility spell when traversing long distances, such as moving away from the boss and running back in. With Kyrian, Divine Toll is a more traditional paladin spell, with Prot and Holy now using Holy Power for their signature abilities. When facing multiple enemies as Ret or Prot, the increase of Holy Power generated from it becomes very worthwhile. Holy has one of the more difficult times generating Holy Power, either Crusader striking enemy target, casting Holy Shock, or healing the person that is applied with your beacon to generate the Holy Power makes it more difficult to cast your signature spells when you need it. Divine Toll is a huge benefit for the Holy Paladin, especially ones that build around the Glimmer build. The easy access to 5 Holy Power generation and Glimmer application with a single keystroke is extremely valuable. The relatively low cooldown and ease of use of the ability makes it a perfect tool for the Holy Paladins and also very effective for the Prot Paladins when faced against multiple targets, but falls off drastically if used only for single target. Ret suffers the most from this ability in single target, with this ability being nothing more than a judgment on a 1-minute cooldown, but faring far better for AoE burst DPS when faced against multiple targets. Summon Steward offers a very useful defensive option should you require the removal of most debuffs and some HP restoration. It also serves as a vendor every 1 hour, but they cannot repair gear, and also as a way to change your talents once every 4 hours. With Necrolord comes Vanquishers Hammer. It's the lowest cooldown covenant ability for the Paladins overall. It doesn't lead too well for any spec, adding moderate damage every 30 seconds and amplifying a specific signature ability. First best for Retribution as the Amplify a spell that will be used whether you're doing single target damage or AoE. Holy Paladin is required to use Word of Glory to activate the benefit, which will require positioning and forethought to use most effectively, but is not the worst option overall. Proc Paladins suffer the most from this ability. Utilizing Word of Glory when it's not needed or required will most likely leave the buff to expire if you're unable to find a good situation to use it. The ability itself is not the greatest in any position, whether it's in the role of DPS, tank or healer. While it is not the best in any aspect, its extreme ease of use is second to none and should be considered if you are learning how to play Paladin in the first place. Do note, however, that other choices overshadow it. Fleshcraft offers a sizable defensive option every 2 minutes. While defensive option is great, especially if you manage to increase its effectiveness to 50% of your HP, the 4-second cast time and the inability to dodge, parry or block while casting makes it a poor choice to cast mid-fight, and wiser choice to cast it before the fight or during mid-fight downtime. Venter offers us Ashen Hello. It's the longest Covenant ability with a whole 4-minute cooldown. It is more of an offensive than a defensive or healing cooldown, with relatively weak healing throughput for the cooldown associated with it. It does, however, open up more holy power generation for both Prot and Holy with the use of Hammer of Wrath while within the affected area. Placing the area badly, while a bit difficult to do so considering its size, will be largely detrimental. Ret will find the best use out of this ability with a heavy focus on Hammer of Wrath. You could effectively outdamage Templar's Verdict from the stacked power increases alone. Prot ascertains direct control when placing down Ashen Hello, enabling the Paladin to drag the next pack over to the zone should the first pack die fast enough to allow it to happen. This also increases the Prot Paladin's damage, causing fights to finish faster instead of dragging on, allowing less combat risk. However, casting in the middle of a fight can also be done, as you can parry, dodge and block while casting it. Holy sees very minimal use as a healing throughput, but is quite effective as a damage throughput, which would be nice to have when farming raid content. Dwarf Shadows is the second movement ability available every minute, and is by far the best choice when needing to reach an area as soon as possible, but struggles on long distance movement, but makes up for it with on-demand teleportation, ideal for short distance movement. When it comes to Soulbind options for the Paladin, they are all relatively close. Generally speaking, you can pick any Soulbind and make it work for damage purposes should you only want to focus on damage. Should you be a Paladin that focuses on multiple roles, it would be best to assign a Soulbind to a role you play to minimize conduit swapping as much as possible. These are what I would suggest for each role for each Covenant, but be free to choose what you think is best. For Kyrian, this is what I would suggest. Pelagos for DPS, Clea for healer, and Mechanicos for tank. For Ventir, I would suggest Nadia for DPS, Theatar for healer, and Draven for tank. Necrolords, I would suggest Marileth for healer, Emeni for DPS, and Hermer for tank. For Night Fae, choose Nia as DPS, Dreamweaver as healer, and Koran as tank. While we are still on the Soulbinds, we'll discuss a bit the conduits for each role. For Ret, the two conduits that will provide the biggest DPS increase will be Templar's Vindication and Virtuous Command. You could also try to make Expurgation work, but you'll need a lot more crit, which won't be available at the start of Shadowlands, so better leave it for now. For Holy, if you want to cover both Mythic Plus and Raiding, Resplendent Light and Focused Light is a safe route. Resplendent Light and Untempered Dedication goes for a risk-reward playstyle. If you are only focusing on Mythic Plus, Focused Light, Bringing Clarity, Righteous Might, Hallowed Discernment will work. If Night Fae, you can choose between Empowered Paralysis or going with Resplendent Light or Untempered Dedication, whatever you would like. For tanks, Punish the Guilty is generally your best to go DPS slot. If you do happen to have a second DPS slot, just go with your Covenant ability. For endurance slots, Prot Paladin should focus on getting Resolute Defender first, then Shielding Words. If you have good usage of Word of Glory or Golden Pot, but it is overall less effective for mitigating burst damage. Holy should focus on getting Golden Pot, especially if Night Fae with empowered Krylisis. If passive self-healing is not required, then consider Shielding Words or Divine Call, whichever interests you the most, but keep in mind that you're more likely to use Light of Dawn instead of Word of Glory in most scenarios. Retribution should focus on getting Shielding Words, especially if you're taking the Healing Hands talent. Else, just go for Golden Pot. For Finesse Conduits, all Paladins should focus on getting Light's Barding, or if you prefer being more of a utility-focused Paladin, you can go for Echoing Blessings. For our final selection of choices, we have Legendaries. For Holy at the start of Shadowlands, go for Inflorescence of the Sunwell, as it covers most situations in Mythic Plus and Raiding, and later on, especially if you're Kyrian, get Shock Barrier for Mythic Plus. If you are really into weaving Light of Martyrs, Marad's Dying Breath is also a very good choice, but trickier to execute due to good positioning and the added risk of killing yourself. For Prot, at the start of Shadowlands, go for Holy Avengers Engraved Sigil. It fares very well for Mythic Plus, but not great for raiding, but it's very good from a defensive point of view, but will require you to take the talent First Avenger. For a pure defensive survivability legendary, the Ardent Protector's Sanctum is best to take, which is effective at further reducing the damage you take when the cooldown is up, but also potentially saving another member also. If you are looking for just pure damage, Bulwark of Righteous Fury is a legendary to go for. For Retribution, Mad Paragon is a very good first choice and is absolutely mandatory if you are Ventir, as with the 30% increase along with the 100% increase from Ashen Hello, your Hammer of Wrath will deal more damage than a Templar's Verdict. Vanguard's momentum works best in your execution phase, as you will manage to maintain the buff as long as you prioritize Hammer of Wrath. Tempest of the Lightbringer is your go-to and only AoE legendary. Relentless Inquisitor is the best all-round legendary to use, however the buff is not maintained, Magistrate's Judgment can be a decent alternative. It is a very good all-round legendary, good for both AoE and single target, and can be utilized by any other role. Something not really talked about too much is the legendary Arbiter's Judgment. From the sims I've performed, it's around 100 DPS less than the strongest legendary, which is Mad Paragon. However, combined with another person utilizing the same legendary, this gap becomes shorter and even possibly a second alternative to AoE DPS, as long as you manage to convince another player to run this legendary and stay between 5 to 20 yards of each other, and they'll also have a bunch of mobs in between you. This is something you shouldn't really mess around with at the start of the expansion, but later on you can mess around with when you have some Soul Ash to spare. With this information, it's very likely subject to change. Hopefully it has given enough information for you to decide what covenant to go for and what choices to make inside the covenant and what legendaries you should go for. While taking my information should be done with a pinch of salt due to the instability of the expansion in the first month, guides on Wowhead and the class Discord give relevant and up-to-date information on what is occurring when they are able to, and links to them can be found below. Hope you guys enjoyed the new expansion, and I hope to see you in the Shadowlands.